towards their seats. That would be wonderful. Thank you all for showing up early this morning. I got here even earlier, so is it beginning to be a problem to park? Has the parade started to fill in? Oh, there is. Okay. Well, hopefully it just started and that you're here and we're glad you're here. I'd like to call the meeting to order and at this point, for you new people, my name is Darlene Dunham. I've had the pleasure of serving in this position for 2 years, and today is my last day, and we'll do swearing in just a few minutes of our new officers. Are there any new members who are here for either the first time as a new member or you've joined but you've never been acknowledged as a new member? Can you stand, please? Pat, and are you new to the area or just new to us?
New 5 years ago.
Great, thank you. Hi.
Hi, I'm Sarah Gilletta, and I am not new to the area in this group.
Well, we're glad you're here.
My name is Susan Monty, and I'm new to all of it. I've been practicing yesterday.
And then, of course, today is the St. Patrick's Day parade, so they're really throwing the whole kitchen sink at you here, but we're glad you're here. Thank you. Hi.
My name is Connie Gilman, and I've lived here about 5 years now.
Well, we're glad you found us. And now are there... Oh, hi! Thank you. Welcome. Are there any more new members? How about guests? How about people that are checking us out today for the first time, seeing if we're the kind of group you want to be with? No guests today. Usually we have guests. Is Tina Gannis here? Tina's not here. Let's see. Wilma, would you be willing to lead us in the pledge this morning?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Thank you. For you new folks, just a quick little bit of housekeeping. We have restrooms out here in the lobby. And parking, if you ever find yourself in this situation again, there's a lot of parking out back, so you can come in this back way. We also have goodies in the back that we sort of do a pay it forward kind of honor system. So there's a couple of jars. Put in whatever you feel you should put in for coffee and goodies, and we take that money and then we buy the stuff for next month. So it's on the honor system, and it has worked beautifully so far with just one exception. And we got that taken care of, and in fact, the next month, we did really well. So we're paying forward for a long time now, or at least a little bit of time. We have at this point in our agenda a moment of silence, and it can be a moment of remembering. It can be a moment of celebration. And in this instance, I would like to do both. I would like to take a moment of silence for all of the people we lose every day to gun violence. And I would like to celebrate the young people and their allies who have stepped forward to show us a way. And if we could just take a moment. Thank you. I think we are so fortunate that these young people who are so articulate and so incredibly passionate can show us that the solution. That I was told by a mentor one time that the problem may be complicated, but the solution rarely is. You just have to make the decision to make that decision. And oftentimes that's the harder part. So we need to make a decision on gun violence in this country and then go forward. We also have a quote that we say just after our moment of silence, and it's a variety of quotes. Last month it was a quote from Barack Obama. This month it's a quote from Maya Angelou, and she says, "I'm a feminist. I've been female for a long time now. It'd be stupid not to be on my own side." And I love that. The approval of the minutes. And Diane, I think Lynn is not here, so we were...
I'm just going to make a motion that we accept the minutes from our February meeting. Do I have a second? Second.
Great. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you. Carrie, do we have a treasurer's report?
We do. We currently have a balance of $4,770.85, and as of the end of February, we had receipts in February of $1,221, and we had expenditures of $130.84. So we're looking good.
We are. And
those renewals, those are looking good.
and that leads us right to Betty. And Betty, Betty's being called away. We have a membership report.
Yes.
Thank you.
We do, because if everyone renews, we'll have 192 members, and that does not include our new members as well.
Oh, that's wonderful. And the
renewals are due by the end of this month, if you haven't done it yet. And I haven't got a new card, but if you have a new card, your name is up at the top where you can see it when you look down in the boxes, you have renewed for 2082. If your name is still on the bottom, you have not, unless you're me and I have. But anyway, please see about that, and you can mail it to Carrie if you like, or she has a square with credit cards, and you can do a check or cash.
And just a quick background, for new members, we are part of a layer of Democratic women this is the lowest level at the chapter in Moore County. There are chapters in many other counties in North Carolina. We then belong to a region of about 8 other counties that form the region, and all of the regions belong to the state. So there is a state women's party. And we collect dues from you, and then we give a tiny portion of those dues to the women's state organization. They give some to the national, and that pays for all of the information that we get to share with you, to put on a convention, to put on regional meetings, etc. There was no communications report, I don't think. No. And a reminder that if you paid your dues anytime after October, they're good for the whole year. Well, I see that our speaker is here, so we will move on. We have the incoming president has chosen as her corresponding secretary Diane Anello. And prior to her being sworn in with everyone else, we need to get a vote on Diane's appointment. What happened is our new incoming president was our old corresponding secretary. So So if I could have a motion, Betty, thank you. A second? Second, thank you. All those in favor of Diana Nello being the corresponding secretary for the next year? Aye. Thank you. And now I would like to take a point of personal privilege and ask my team to come up to that.
Okay. We do have an announcement. Juanita Harper she has a broken bone, and she's in the hospital. And we've been alerted that she would enjoy being visited by tomorrow. Is that correct, Juanita?
Is this a new injury? A new?
She's in the hospital.
Yes, she fell.
Who brought that information?
I think Ann Langford did. Ann?
She's in the hospital here.
Yeah. But she hadn't fallen before. She'd been in an auto accident, right? Yeah.
This is a new, unfortunately. Oh, and one other thing
Yes.
before we move on. Sandy has, this is supposed to be later on the agenda. We're going to pass around a volunteer sheet for the new members brunch in May. And it's going to be circulating during the entire meeting. Please think about the generous contributions to the brunch, and we'll explain more later.
Thank you, thank you. I didn't know if you were going to do that under your own, so thanks for doing that. Now, my point of personal privilege. Can I have my team come up, please? And we have one person missing. Sandy, are you part of my team? This is my team. They have had my back for 2 years. Betty, as you heard on the membership report, Carrie Arnold, treasurer, Sandy Watercott, communications, and Diana Nello, outgoing programs, vice president program, incoming corresponding secretary, and Lynn Hancock, who is not here, recording secretary, Paula Shelton, old corresponding secretary. Former. Oh, yeah. Oh, you think I would know. Incoming president. And what I'd like to do is thank you all so much. They gave me a beautiful gift at our executive board meeting, but I decided to get these to them here because I hadn't had them done at the executive board meeting. Paula.
Right away.
We know that.
Diane, I'm going to give you 2 because I'm going to ask you to take Lynn's. Not because I like you better. And Betty and Carrie, thank you both so much. I could not have done this without you. You have no Thank you, my friend. And last but not least, because she is going to need this, her very own personalized gavel that says,
Oh, it's got my name.
and you better stay for 2 years because it's president from 2018 to 2020. Thank you all. And Wilma, can I ask you to come on up? And it is all yours. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask, I have been asked to swear in the new board, the new officers. So I'm going to ask all of them to please come forward. Paula Sheldon, Jessica Wells, Jeanette Sabo, Betty Barnett, Nina Carwell is not here, and Darlene, too, you come up too because you're going to be past president. Okay, Diane and Ella. Yeah, come on up, Diane. Thank you. Okay. Okay, President, Paula Sheldon, you have been duly elected president. The Democratic women of Moore County have shown your highest honor and trust by electing you to the presidency. You shall preside at all business and executive committee meetings. You shall call special meetings with the approval of the executive board. You shall appoint committee chairpersons and be an ex officio member of all the committees except for the nominating committee. Do you accept the challenge and responsibility of this office for the next 2 years, beginning today? If so, please answer yes.
Yes.
Okay. First Vice Presidents for Programming, we have 2, Jessica Wells and Jenny Szabo. You 2 have been elected co-first vice presidents. Your duties shall be to serve in the absence of the president and assist the president in carrying out and coordinating activities designed to implement the purposes of the organization. You shall serve as the programming chair and form a program committee if so desired. You shall serve as this committee's chairperson. You shall undertake other duties as the president may delegate. Do you accept these responsibilities? If so, please respond. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Secretary, Betty Barnett. You have been elected secretary. You will keep accurate minutes of the Moore County Democratic Women meetings and of the executive committee meetings as required. You shall make sure these minutes are transmitted to the president in a timely manner for her review prior to their disbursement to the membership. You shall create or respond to any correspondence when directed to do so by the president. You shall perform other duties as assigned by the president. Do you accept these responsibilities? If so, please respond.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to do you next, Diane, Corresponding Secretary. You have been elected or appointed Corresponding Secretary because she's filling out an unexpired term. You will carry out all necessary duties in the absence of the recording secretary. You shall be responsible for sending out cards and notes to members in the event of illnesses, death, and other significant life events. You shall perform other duties as requested by the recording secretary and the president. Do you accept these responsibilities? If so, please respond by saying yes. Okay. Darlene Donovan, immediate past president. You shall serve as immediate past president. Will you continue to share your thoughts and give your support to the Moore County Democratic women during the coming year and when called upon? If so, please respond. Okay. Okay. Okay, to the members, do you pledge to nurture the efforts of your officers by helping to mold and shape the character of the Moore County Democratic women as directed by them? If so, okay. All right, I now pronounce you installed officers of the Moore County Democratic women. There's a little... Hold it, come back. I'm going to read this little quote because I think I like this. In your moment of success, I wish for you a greater mountain to climb, a wider sea to sail, a more profound challenge to meet. But it has been the journey to the summit that reaches for distant shores, the tenacity to answer the call that has made you the special person that you are today. And that was by Kaylee Daniels. Thank you.
I do want to just take a moment and thank, first of all, Diane was taken off guard when we asked her to fill in for us for a year for the corresponding secretary, and I want to thank her so much for being so quick to respond. Also, Lynn is not here today, but I was so impressed when I joined the board a year ago. We have a dynamic group of very intelligent women on this board, and it's been a pleasure to serve with them, and I look for continued involvement with the former and the current board because we just have so many gifts and experience to share with this group of women. I do want to thank Wilma for taking the time to, we're so proud of Wilma. she's our local success story for taking the time to swear us in. Thank you so much. First of all, I want to go over some dates to remember and to keep in mind. March 24th, next Saturday, is the Moore County Democratic Party Convention. It's right here in the Village Hall. It's 9:30 to noon. Also on the same day in Raleigh, we have the movement March for Our Lives. It's the action against gun violence. March for Our Lives. And that's the same day in Raleigh. On April 14th, we have the Democratic Women of North Carolina Region 6 meeting, the 14th. Catherine Murphy is the point person for that. She has advised us that it will start at 10, but the doors open at 9, and there will be light refreshments there that we are providing because we're the host. Also, on that same evening, April 14th, at the Reynolds Coliseum in Raleigh, we had the Unity Dinner for the Democratic Party of North Carolina. And the Minnesota Senator, Amy Klobuchar, is the guest speaker. And she is really a wealth of history. She is the first elected female senator in the state of Minnesota. She was a typical attorney. She had a lot of experience. She got aggravated when she had a not so pleasant experience being forced out of the hospital with a baby that had a severe illness after one day. And that's what threw her into politics. And she's just got a powerful story to tell. And along with our own governor, Governor Cooper, they will be hosting and honoring different individuals. So that's on the 14th, and that's at night. April 2nd, we saw a little miracle happen in Pennsylvania this past week. I mean, when you look at the statistics, and I've lost so much sleep in the last week sitting up, and I mean, if you look at the news, you just can't help yourself. I mean, last night I just was so angry. At 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm still looking at the news. But this was something to celebrate. I was afraid it was going to be one of those nail biters with a coin toss like in Virginia, and it was not. And when you look at what the autopsy of that campaign was, what was it? It was hard work. It was not taking anybody for granted. It was reaching out to every individual. Well, where does that start? It starts with a group like us. It starts at the local level, the most important level, not the lower. We are the most important. We're the ground. And that also starts with the Democratic headquarters of Moore County, which will be located at 135 West Vermont. I do that speech and that rah-rah because we are going to be looking for all kinds of volunteers. It's projected to open on or about April 2nd, and it will also house combined campaigns, most likely of Helen Probst Mills, Lowell Simon, and the 3 8th Congressional District candidates, the sheriff's candidate, and after filing in July, the soil and water positions of Kim Geddes and our own Jeanette Sable. So, again, we'll be looking for volunteers. And then, May 12th is the May 8th, is the Democratic primary and school bond election. So we want to keep that in mind. And of course, all this will be posted on our website. May 12th is a big, nice, pleasant experience. We have the new member brunch. That's what's being passed around right now. We had a wonderful time last year, and Helen Mills has offered her home, Helen Probst Mills, and it will be at a different time than normal. It'll be 11 to 1. Volunteers will come a bit earlier to bring the food, and it's a time to celebrate all the new members. We've had tremendous growth in the last year, and bless her for offering her private home for this event. On the 19th of May, we have the big fundraiser for Moore County Democratic Party. Some of you have already received phone calls asking for a little donation or participation. And we outgrew last year's venue, or the last time we had it. It is now listed to be at, it's going to be in competition with Prince Harry, but it's May 19th, and it's going to be at the Carolina Hotel Grand Ballroom. So look for phone calls, look for us to ask you, invite you to come, donate. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think we hit all of our, yep. So, any announcements of events or general interest to the membership? Tina.
Polling lecture on Tuesday. We have a special speaker, Terry Phoenix, who herself is transgender. She goes by T. And it will be 7:30 in Owens Auditorium, and we're looking for a big turnout of progressive people because we need advocates and we need support for the LGBT community. The Spectrum Club, the high school club, will be there with its representatives, and St. Philip's Pride will be there as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Okay. Diane, would you please come up and introduce our speaker?
So today's speaker, Rob Schofield. He is the director of North Carolina Policy Watch, and if you haven't heard of North Carolina Policy Watch, I'm sure Rob will tell you all about it. It is a wonderful organization. It is involved in so many things around the state that it's just really incredible. He has 3 decades of experience as a lawyer, a lobbyist, a writer, and a commentator. At Policy Watch, he writes, edits daily online commentaries, and handles numerous public speaking events, such as today. And he also delivers a radio commentary that's broadcast weekdays on WRAL and WCHL, and hosts News and Views, a weekly radio news magazine that airs on multiple stations across our state. Today he is going to discuss the top public policy debates going on in Raleigh right now. At the end of his remarks, we will have some questions and answers, so if you could just hold your questions till then, that would be great. Rob.
Oh, okay. Plenty of time.
And then questions.
Okay. Well, thank you all so very much for being here. I pulled up and I thought everybody was here for the parade, and it's like they're all in here. It's an amazing turnout on a Saturday morning. I'm just delighted to be with you. I am personally someone who's never been a member of an organized party. I've always been a Democrat, but I am here in a nonpartisan role today to talk to you about really the battle of ideas that our state and our country are in the midst of, and our role at NC Policy Watch and playing a small part in that. By way of a little more introduction, I can tell you, I've worked a lot with Reverend Barber down through the years. He sort of came, I don't know how, he came to kind of rely on us as his research arm. I'm not sure why he thought I was his research arm, but I get a lot of texts from Reverend Barber at 11:30 or 12. I'm giving a speech tomorrow morning. What is the poverty rate? And a couple months ago, I sent him a text that said, Reverend B, I get a lot of this stuff from Google that you asked me for. And he said, well, we're going to call you the minister of Google. So that is my unofficial title in the movement. I am the minister of Google. I'm also happy to be here this morning because this is actually my anniversary, St. Patrick's Day. I didn't wear green, which was lame. But I met my wife 34 years ago today. And so you all have given me an opportunity to stop at the store on the way back to Raleigh. Because it's been a very busy week. So I really appreciate you having me. NC Policy Watch is, as you've heard from Diane, is a progressive, nonprofit news and commentary shop. I started out as a lawyer and an advocate and a lobbyist for a group called the North Carolina Justice Center. Actually, originally the North Carolina Justice Center was something called the North Carolina Legal Services Resource Center. I came here in 1992. I had been the lobbyist for the American Civil Liberties Union of Illinois after I'd gotten out of law school. and I came here in '92 to work what was for the state policy arm of the legal aid and legal services movement. We represented poor people at the General Assembly, which was, obviously not typically a very popular cause, but it was an important one. We had a lot of success. But in the mid-'90s, when Newt Gingrich and his buddies took over, you remember the contract with America, we referred to it as the contract on America in the mid-'90s. They defunded legal services and legal aid for poor people in many respects, defunded our organization. We were forced at that time to turn it into something that was privately funded. At that time, it had been largely federally funded. We became the North Carolina Justice Center. I was a lawyer there for many years. It's a long, convoluted story. But NC Policy Watch was formed in 2004 by my former colleague, Chris Fitzsimon. Many of you probably have heard of Chris, remember Chris. Yeah, okay. Well, obviously, the voice of God. You know Chris, the wonderful voice that Chris had. Chris founded NC Policy Watch along with Jim and Barbara Goodman. Jim is the owner of Capital Broadcasting, and one of the great symmetries and happenstances in the universe is that basically Chris and now I have Jesse Helms' old job. If you think about it, that's how Jesse came, it was before my time in North Carolina, but how I guess he came to fame in many respects was doing the commentary on the WRAL news every night in Raleigh. And that was because A.J. Fletcher, who had founded Capital Broadcasting, was Jesse's patron. And A.J. Fletcher's grandson is an amazing guy named Jim Goodman, who's had a great ideological journey and has become a fighting progressive and has turned his foundation, the A.J. Fletcher Foundation, into a funder of progressive causes, and he's one of the real driving forces behind our project. So it's a very positive, source of positive progress in the universe that we're doing this now. I guess what I wanted to talk to you about this morning was the concept of, obviously the reason a lot of us are here is because of Donald Trump. Trump has made an enormous impact on our policy and politics in 2017, 18. But I want to argue and talk to you about the fact that I think that the moment that we're in the midst of, and the reason so many of us are energized, maybe because of Trump, but in many respects, this is a much bigger issue than Trump. Trump is, in my estimation, not the cause of the problem, he's a symptom of the problem. Really, the right has been, to their credit, has been winning the battle of ideas in our country for many decades. If you go back and trace the history back to the 1970s, when the Chamber of Commerce and the famous memo from Lewis Powell, who later became a member of the U.S. Supreme Court, was authored, they made a concerted decision and an effort to push back. They saw the country was going too far left, it was too progressive. We had things like the EPA being formed and workplace safety rules, and they wanted to reestablish corporate hegemony in our country. And they went about doing it very intentionally. They spent millions upon millions of dollars on lobbyists, on think tanks, groups like the Heritage Foundation, and every state's got a John Locke Foundation and a Civitas Institute. There's regional foundations like that, and they took over talk radio, and they basically put all their eggs in the basket of winning this battle of ideas, this communications war, and really winning the hearts and minds of people in our country and changing the debate. As crazy as many of their ideas are, and as much as we'd love to dismiss them, there's really no denying their success. They've been enormously successful in changing it. If you think about it, like I remember when I was in high school in the 1970s, and we were debating topics like resolved. The oil companies in the United States should be nationalized and be made public entities. Can you imagine having a debate like that today? Ideas that 30 or 40 years ago would have seemed absurd to us are now considered moderately conservative. When you hear the right talk about public schools, they talk about government schools. They talk, the idea of course, of guns being literally everywhere is something we wouldn't have even considered as a possibility 30 or 40 years ago. The ideas of things like privatizing Social Security, privatizing our public schools, all those ideas are the result of decades of drumbeating from folks on the right who've just simply said these ideas enough times and with enough semi-respectable speakers that it starts to seem sort of plausible and reasonable. And I think one of the reasons progressives find themselves in a tough spot these days is because we've kind of ceded that territory. We've not battled back as strongly as we should with respect to the battle of ideas. So, there's been this cumulative effect of this drumbeat of messages coming from the right, and you see it on issue after issue. And so again, that's where NC Policy Watch came from. It was the first real effort here in North Carolina to push back. Chris had actually led something in the 90s called the Common Sense Foundation. A few of you may remember that, but it was a very underfunded, sort of struggling enterprise. But since we founded NC Policy Watch, I feel like we're starting to make some real progress. And as I say, we're part of a larger organization now. The Justice Center, which the group I worked with as a lawyer for many years, is now a 55-plus person, think tank with economists and litigators and lobbyists and organizers and researchers. So it's a formidable organization. And Policy Watch is an 8-person news and commentary shop. We have myself, we're about to hire a second commentator to take my old job. I've taken Chris's job. But we have 4 full-time investigative reporters, too, which has been a real important sea change and an important development in our movement. I think it was Chris's vision. I'm not even sure I fully appreciated it when I started there, that this could have this kind of effect. But we've seen how, especially with the demise of the traditional mainstream news media, so many reporters leaving mainstream media outlets, it's been so important to have our core of reporters covering state government. Many of you may be aware of a story that we broke a couple of weeks ago, which has, of course, given me a little bit of heartburn, but I think it was a very important one. And it was, of course, the story of a Democratic legislator who has been accused by a variety of women of sexual advances and inappropriate conduct. And that's the kind of story, frankly, I think that the mainstream news media should have been telling. But because they're so understaffed and maybe just not up to the task anymore, it took our reporter, Billy Ball, who's really we hired to be an education reporter, an education policy reporter. But he kept going over to the General Assembly covering an education committee and kept hearing stories from lobbyists and women in the General Assembly, legislative aides, about sexual advances and inappropriate conduct by a particular lawmaker. And then as he started to look into it and started to follow up on some of those leads, the story of the lawmaker who ultimately was the subject of the story that came out a couple of weeks ago, a Democratic lawmaker named Dwayne Hall, started rising to the top constantly, over and over again. And we had to make a decision. Are we going to send our education reporter to work on this story? It's not what we hired him to do, but we decided it was an incredibly important story. It needs to be told. This is so much of the heart of the rebirth of the progressive movement in our country in recent months and years is the story of women, like the women in this room, speaking up, standing up, not taking this crap anymore, and standing up and running for office. And so even though our mission is, at its core is about poverty and social justice, we felt that this is right at the core, the empowerment of women is and pushing back against discrimination and inappropriate behavior is really at the heart of that. So we produced the story. I think there may be more stories to come along this line. So I urge you to stay tuned to our website. There will be a story this week that Billy will be writing about the fact that the General Assembly has now taken some actions to, we're going to have some videos that legislators are going to watch so they'll know not to, sexually harass people. It seems like a pretty minimal step, I would say. What we were trying to show was that there is literally no place in the General Assembly for someone who's been victimized like this. And think about it, the typical situation, you're a 22-year-old legislative aide at the General Assembly, and here you've got this middle-aged lawmaker who's making inappropriate comments, and what do you do? It's terrifying. Plus you add on to that the fact that it's a highly partisan environment. Let's say you're a Democrat, you believe in the Democratic cause, you may work for a Democratic legislator. Right now the only place you can go is to the office of the Speaker of the House to complain. So think of I'm going to go to the Republican Speaker of the House to tell on, and it's not anonymous, you have to disclose your name. So there are many legislatures across the country that have set up processes that are much more robust and sensitive to the plight of people who've been victimized in this way. And that's obviously the step that needs to happen next in the General Assembly in North Carolina. We'll be writing about that and commenting on it in the days and weeks ahead, and I'd be happy. We can get to questions later about that topic. But as I get back to what our core mission is about, we've made the decision that we're going to participate and push back in this battle of ideas by generating content. We generate, I like to say, like 10,000 words a week on our website, maybe more than that now, for roughly 10,000 people who pay attention to politics in North Carolina. If you think about it, I mean, y'all are exceptional people in that you're engaged and energized and pay attention to politics. It's a pretty small group of people who really pay attention, especially to what's going on in Raleigh and state government. There's the legislators themselves, there's the media, there's the lobbyists, there's the local elected officials, and there's activists like yourselves. It's a pretty small group. But even if we just move that group, I think we can make an important difference. And that's really at the core of what Policy Watch has been doing for the last several years. And we're also very proud of the fact that we are, although we're clearly, as I tell you, my party affiliation and my ideological orientation, we are nonpartisan. We're a C3 organization. We will write critical stories about Democrats when they, don't adhere to, when they act inappropriately or they betray the cause. And I think we distinguish ourselves in many respects from our competitors like the Locke Foundation and the Civitas Institute, who I think are just blatantly partisan in their work for the Republicans. So we'll give heck to Democrats when we need to. So the good news, of course, is that alternatives like ours are springing up. There is, in this battle of ideas, groups are finally joining the battle. I feel like we're really starting to make some difference. We're pushing back. We've got lots of people in addition to our staff who contribute to our Policy Watch websites. I hope you'll check them out, ncpolicywatch.com. We have a very active blog we call the Progressive Pulse. We're on social media. We do Facebook Live events every Monday where you can hear from our reporters about the stories that they're working on. We do monthly luncheons where even if you can't make it to Raleigh, you can watch them live on Facebook or on other electronic media. And it feels like we're starting to sort of push the rock back up the hill in this battle of ideas. But of course, the environment in which we operate now in Raleigh is a very difficult one. It's the overriding theme, I would say, for North Carolina politics of the last several years has been sort of a wasted opportunity. North Carolina was a decade ago sort of a fast-growing, moderate state, really poised to leap to the top of the pack in our country. But because of the Great Recession, the political upheaval that resulted from the Great Recession and the takeover and then the gerrymandering of districts and the fact that an evenly divided state has become a state in which Republican conservatives have a supermajority in the General Assembly, we've seen a lot of backsliding in our state in a host of areas. Job growth isn't cutting it. North Carolina has not been creating enough, even though we think these are pretty good times in many places. We talk about a Carolina comeback. Official unemployment rate's pretty low. In fact, we'd need 375,000 jobs, new jobs in North Carolina right now to get back to the employment rate we had before the Great Recession in terms of what percentage of our population was employed. We have more than half our counties have fewer jobs than they did before the Great Recession. Obviously, we have exploding wealth inequality. This is particularly harming people of color, people at the bottom. We've got lots of growth in investment income, but very little growth in wages. Middle-class jobs continue to dry up in our country. And it's not just, of course, in North Carolina, but it's been worse here. And this has been abetted really by fiscal policies and by public policies at the General Assembly that have intentionally taken us away from a time in which government was providing intentional public solutions to the problems we confront. Instead, we've gone to this sort of dog-eat-dog, markets uber alles model in which literally the market economy is sort of envisioned as almost like something that was handed down from the Almighty. Rather than what it is, which is one of the most amazing things that humans ever invented, but it remains something that humans invented. It's a tool that we use to produce wealth and that we have to regulate and make work for our benefit. Instead, it's been now treated as something that's sacrosanct. Government can't involve itself at all. And the result, I think, is clear that what's happened since then is this growing wealth inequality, the decline of our natural environment because of the decline of environmental regulations, the disinvestment in public education has been enormous in our state, and we're going to be paying the price for that for many years to come. A lot of other areas in which we've seen a very negative trend in the General Assembly in Raleigh in recent years. Voting rights, of course. We've had the monster voting law and all the voter suppression efforts, and the gerrymandering, which you all are so, I'm sure, acutely aware of. We've had assaults on consumer protection rights. We've, of course, had the explosion of liberalizing gun laws, the attacks on immigrants, the whole battle over HB2 and the attack on LGBTQ rights. So another issue, I wrote a column this past week that I think goes much underreported, especially at the national level. I would argue it's the most important issue going on in Washington right now, is the fight for the control of our federal courts. This is an initiative, actually, we are part of a coalition, the Why Courts Matter coalition, that was started by some national groups in Washington during the mid-years of the Obama administration, because at that time, the Republicans in the Senate were blocking every nominee that President Obama was putting forth, even very mainstream, moderate nominees. And they were invoking something called the blue slip rule, which allows the home state senator to block any nominee. And so Richard Burr was for years blocking nominees to the Eastern District of North Carolina. We have the longest vacant federal court slot in the whole country in the Eastern District of North Carolina, thanks to Richard Burr. It's been well over a decade. So now that the Republicans have taken charge and Trump is in charge, they decided that blue slip rule was really sort of archaic. We don't have that anymore. So Democrats are not able to block nominees. And as you all know, Trump is appointing reactionary judge after reactionary judge. The numbers are stunning. There's no people of color. There's very few women. Some of these folks have zero qualification to be dog catcher or local judge, much less a federal lifetime appointed judge. And when Trump took office, 15% of the federal judiciary was vacant. So think about how many judges he's getting a chance to appoint. And obviously, I think this is the big payoff. This is what the religious right wanted, right? This was their reason they were willing to hold their nose and vote for this person who they recognized was morally bankrupt and put him in office because of this very thing. It was to get Neil Gorsuch on the Supreme Court. There was a really shocking event in Washington a couple of weeks ago. I saw that People for the American Way had posted on their website of a sort of religious revival in which some conservative pastors were essentially praying for the liberal judges on the Supreme Court to die. Basically, praying for Trump, praying for the Senate Judiciary Committee to confirm all of Trump's judges. At least they're pretty upfront about what they want. So it's an amazing time. We're in the battle of our lives. And so I think the other thing I would say is that, and I'm going to actually get to some good news here eventually, is that these victories, like the victory in Pennsylvania, some of these encouraging electoral results, the fact that I think there's a great deal of optimism from amongst progressives that the elections of 2018 may very well go in a positive way. Even if that happens, even if we win, even if progressives win the presidency in 2020, we have to realize that the folks that we are doing battle with, they're committed to this for the long haul. It's not like you win the election and then you just go back to life and you don't have to think about politics anymore. We wish that were true. I'm sure many of us felt that way when President Obama was elected. It's like, thank God, that's taken care of. I can go on with my life. I don't have to worry about these battles. But unfortunately, I think for the time being, we have to get in this fight, and we have to fight it every day. The admonition you have to go out and work in your local communities and get out the vote, and to be part of the battle of ideas online, on social media, not to shirk our responsibility to write letters to the editor, to push forward a progressive view of the world. I think all those things, we wish it weren't so, but I think we just have to do it. We have to work because really the future of our country is at stake. The good thing is there's lots of good news in North Carolina, actually, in the long haul fight. Number one is, of course, just that you all are here. I've been getting, asked to do talks like this all over the state in the last year that I never got before. And it's groups like this, even in counties, small, conservative, rural counties where the Democrats realize they probably don't have a chance of electing a lawmaker. They're still out. They're going to at least make the other side spend the money and work to elect their people in every single district. It's a kind of spirit that's really encouraging. The rise of women, very encouraging. Clearly, we have not become Alabama or Mississippi overnight. There, in North Carolina, the public attitudes toward the issues, it's still a very purple, evenly divided state. Increasingly urban state with lots of transplants. The demographics in our state are trending in a very positive direction. If you look at a lot of the issues that the Republicans and the conservatives are holding up, they're not supported by public opinion. I just made a quick list here of issues in which you can find incredibly strong poll results for the progressive point of view. Public education. higher minimum wage, stronger gun laws, reproductive freedom, a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, tougher environmental protection laws, opposition to school vouchers, opposition to tax cuts for millionaires, in favor of stronger consumer protection laws, even marriage equality. The change there has been, remarkable in just the last few years. So the public opinion is with the progressive point of view. That's going to win out over time. There's big divides, of course, within the conservative movement. You see this both with the sane people who realize that Donald Trump is not sane, and just within, even in Raleigh, you see it in the General Assembly where the conservative majority came to power in North Carolina in 2010 promising openness and transparency in government, and we're going to change the way things, implying that there was all this corruption under the Democrats. Some of it true, but they've done just the opposite. They have abandoned open and due process in the General Assembly. They ram through bills in the middle of the night. They hold committee hearings when no one can attend them. They refuse to disclose documents and records that ought to be public. All those things, I think, have caused some divides. There are good, well-meaning conservatives who are not happy with that, and it's a problem they've got. To say the demographic changes favor progressives, and again, there's just been the emergence of this increasingly potent and sustainable progressive grassroots movement. I keep getting requests to talk to folks like this all over the state. So I think there's good reason to be very encouraged about the long run if we just stay in the fight. So I urge you to stick with it. In 2030, I think North Carolina will probably be the 7th largest state in the country. We're a very fast-growing, increasingly important state, increasingly, as I say, a purple state, really a battleground state where it's sort of like the future of the country is sort of at stake here, basically. And we've got to stay in it. We just can't get discouraged. I think we're making progress. I congratulate you all for being out here today. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Yes, ma'am.
So, I used to be an NC Spin junkie, and they took it off public TV, and they switched it somewhere, and now I can't find it.
NC Spin is now on public TV.
They could have asked.
Yeah, it's on WMC. You all get UNC TV here, yeah. It's on Friday nights up in the Triangle. Chris is still doing it. We're actually trying to figure out if there's another, stay tuned. There could be another somewhat even more progressive news and commentary show coming. Would that be an interesting idea? Yeah, maybe not just a bunch of old white guys sitting around. I know that'd be a radical concept.
Rachel Maddow started on Air America.
Right, exactly. So, I think there's hope on that front as well. So stay tuned on that one. But Chris is still in the fight. What Chris is doing, in case y'all if I didn't make it clear, Fitzsimon left us because the national funders came to him and said, "We love NC Policy Watch. We need this in a bunch of other states." And Chris said, "Well, I don't want to do that. I'll need this, and I'll need that, and I'll need this." And they said, "Okay." So he's now trying to create NC Policy Watch in 10 other states, and he's still in North Carolina, still doing NC Spin, still talking to me every day, but he's flying all over the country trying to take our model. Yes, ma'am.
Three-part question.
Sure.
Is North Carolina becoming more and more of a retirement haven? And will then the demographics change significantly? And we know that all the voters trend right
Mm-hmm.
they're voting. Do you anticipate that as a change?
Well, it's a factor. There's no doubt about it. On the other hand, we're also a state in which that is becoming more urban, that's becoming more racially diverse. So there probably, I suppose there's a cancellation factor. I think the bottom line is that North Carolina is going to remain a very evenly divided state politically and ideologically for some time to come now. It just doesn't, as it continues to grow, it seems very unlikely that we're going to see any kind of a hard turn to the right. But it's, that's a factor. On the other hand, it's not a foregone conclusion that all folks who get older will always be conservative, look at me, look at some people in this room. Things are changing. I think there's hope. Yes, ma'am.
What's your sense of what's going to happen to Wayne Hall and who will be the replacement?
Yeah.
Inevitable happen.
We've been very careful not to call for his resignation or take any kind of. I don't want anybody to think that we there was been some controversy, which you probably are aware of, with this story that got some attention in the fact that Hall disclosed after we had gone with the story, a fact that we had chosen not to disclose, which that he had once had a romantic relationship with a woman who works in our organization, who's actually the daughter of our executive director, Rick Glazier. Who's, I'm sorry?
Widely known.
Yeah.
Rick Glazier's daughter.
Yeah, Rick is the executive. And, I'll tell you, when the reporter, Billy Ball, came to me a couple weeks before we released the story, and he said, I got a Me Too story, and I was waiting for it to be about a particular senator. And he said, I got to tell you, it's about Dwayne Hall. And I also got to tell you that he had a relationship with Megan, who's an administrative assistant in the building. And I thought, oh my God. I was just like, what next? It had been a very bad month anyway. I said, I'm gonna have to tell Rick this. It's gonna be really, because I didn't feel like we could break this story without talking to the executive director, although generally Policy Watch has pretty much complete editorial freedom. So I did bring it to him, and he was remarkably calm and really professional about it, and said, okay, well, you guys get your facts right, get your story right. He even quizzed us about, you guys really sure about this particular source, that particular source, and we ultimately went with it. After that, Dwayne Hall, went on the attack, like a lot of people when they don't have anything to really defend themselves on the facts, they attack the messenger, and accused us of having some sort of vendetta to go after him because he'd broken up with this woman. Which was really just, and then he attacked us which I thought was sort of ironic for a Democrat, calling us a leftist organization, and we're violating our 501c3 status and all these crazy things. It's sad to watch a poor, person who's obviously had great ambitions. I think he probably was interested in running for higher office, and I take no particular pleasure in this. I don't know what he's going to do. It's a really weird situation. He has denied this stuff, although he's not presented any credible denials of the behavior. My impression is that more reporting is being done by some other outlets, and there could be more news on this subject. But to date, he's been asked by Governor Cooper and by the head of the Democrats in the House and many of his fellow Democrats to resign. But he's refused to do it. He did, I think this week, get rid of his Twitter account. So I don't know whether that means anything or not. There's a woman running, an interesting politically active woman in that district in Raleigh who's announced her candidacy for that seat. So I don't know. I think, at this point, the primary, I guess, doesn't absentee voting start like next week or something like that? Pretty soon. So at this point, I guess he's going to stick with it. But it would seem that it's going to be very difficult to remain viable when the other members of your party won't speak to you. And, it's some people have said to me, well, isn't this like the Al Franken thing? And wasn't that a bad deal that Al Franken got? And I have to tell you all, I really had admired Al Franken, probably like a lot of you. I read his books. I thought he was, just such a funny, brilliant guy. And I had actually asked him to come speak at a Policy Watch event just before the information came out about his behavior. But doggone it, I'm sorry. Times have changed. And, the movement and the cause that we're all for is more important than any one person or their personal career. And, that's just that behavior. I'm sorry, it's not acceptable anymore. It might have been acceptable at one point. But we're making progress, and I'm sorry for the people who maybe will lose their careers as a result of it. But again, the movement and the cause are more important than that. So I don't know what Dwayne's going to do, but we're going to continue to report on that subject. I think, as I said, I think it's conceivable there could be more stories about other lawmakers. So you all should probably stay tuned. And yes.
Follow on to that.
Yeah.
You know that we're working with the League of Women Voters on House Bill 662, which is designed to cover the 500,000 people who were left out of the Medicaid expansion.
Right.
Paul was one of the signatories.
Yeah.
It's a bipartisan bill, and my hope is that the other side doesn't swoop in and kind of crowd the Dems out.
Yeah.
For instance, on Monday, I think it's Monday, NAMI is having their monthly meeting, and their invited speaker is Tom McGinnis, who is the opponent of Helen Brooks Mills from our neighborhood. So I do not want him to swoop in and act like he's Mr. Mental Health.
That's
So
interesting.
I'm looking for advocates to attend that meeting, which will be here on Monday night.
You know, in general,
You'll be here, and it is Monday night.
I think the thing that you can continue to say as you enter into these debates with folks is that the ideological debate that's going on in Raleigh about the role of government and the way whether we fund it adequately or not, the Republicans have shown themselves to be sort of, they are opponents of the idea of funding our public services and structures adequately, like mental health. You simply cannot have the kind of mental health system, education system, the basic public structures that we need in a free society that will nurture its middle class if you continually slash taxes on the wealthy. Here's an important number to keep in mind. It undergirds all these debates over public structures and systems. Historically in North Carolina, since the 60s and 70s, we'd spent about 6.7 to 7% of our total state income on state and local government. That's the best measure of how much you're spending on government. You've got total resources, the total state income. We measure it all, and then we say how much does it go state and local government. Around 6.5% to 7%. In the last several years under Republican leadership, that number has just gone off the table. It's now headed down to around 5%. And so, in effect, that's like a 20% cut in what we're spending on public structures and services. Even if we had just left things flat, we didn't have to raise taxes. If we just left them where they were at the prior to the Great Recession, we would have literally billions more dollars in our state to fund essential public services. We wouldn't have had to have cut public teachers. We'd have salaries that were truly competitive all over the state and on a national basis. We'd have funding for mental health services, for environmental protection. But instead, we've made this decision as a state under Republican leadership that government is a problem rather than we've come to relate to government like we relate to Lowe's and Home Depot. And I think we're all guilty of this to a certain extent. We've become such effective consumers in our society that we look at government as something we want as much as we can get for ourselves at the cheapest possible price, rather than as stakeholders and co-owners and shareholders, which is what we really ought to be relating to government as, a place where we come together to bring out the best in our society, not a place with which we have an adversarial relationship. So I don't know, that's a long-winded answer about mental health, but yes, ma'am.
Since you're nonpartisan,
Yes, ma'am.
give us the real story about the pipeline.
Well, the best place to get the story on the Atlantic Coast Pipeline is to read Lisa Sorg's stories on NC Policy Watch. Lisa Sorg, our environmental reporter, I think, no question, the best environmental reporter, and admittedly, there aren't a lot of them, but in North Carolina, one of the best in the country. She just posted a story on our blog this morning at 6:30. I got up at 7:15 to check my email, and Lisa had already posted something to the blog. Federal Judge Boyle ruled yesterday against, actually, the pipeline owners in favor of some local landowners who were trying to deny access to their land. Yeah, I mean, I think the story on the pipeline is a depressing one, actually. There are enormous environmental issues that it's going to bring about and problems for the eastern part of the state. It's basically what it is. It's a pipeline. It's not like it's a distribution center to bring natural gas to eastern North Carolina. It's just a freeway to take the gas south of here. And there's going to be a lot of environmental damage. There's going to be a lot of damage, not surprisingly, to lower income communities of color, who tend to be the ones who get their communities bulldozed and taken over when these kinds of projects are undertaken. And of course, it's being done at a time in our society when we ought to be moving away from fossil fuels. We ought to be, this is going to be fracked natural gas coming from West Virginia, going down through eastern North Carolina in a giant pipeline that's going to be endangering species and waterways, and there'll be air pollution and water pollution. I mean, I think it's a bad idea. And we ought to be instead investing aggressively in solar and wind and all other forms of sustainable energy. That's clearly the future. That's where the future, if we have a future, that's where it lies. Not with, doubling down on fossil fuels, as easy as it may seem to do. So Lisa's just written story after story. She's interviewed the landowners. She's interviewed the environmental advocates. She's interviewed the proponents of the pipeline as well. And I urge you to check them out on our website. Lisa Sorg, S-O-R-G. And again, if you just go to ncpolicywatch.com, it'll be real evident where her stories are. And she just was awarded. We're members of the North Carolina Press Association. We won 7 awards at the most recent banquet, and Lisa was selected as one of the top award winners. She won the Weather's Freedom of Information Act award for her reporting on lots of issues, and we're very proud of her. She's one of the best. What else? Anything else I can talk? Yes?
My concern in your organization is basically a news organization, is the damage that's being done with this fake news.
Yeah.
With this idea that you can't trust what, and how are you addressing it, and do you have any advice for any of us when someone presents us with this argument, when they sort of undercut the whole basis of saying, well, I can't listen to you because you're giving. Yeah, because
we all pick the news we want to listen to, that problem. Yeah. It's a problem. I confess that I'm not sure I'm the complete solution to it. I am, however, proud of the truth that we tell and the quality of the reporting that we do. Our reporters are recognized by nonpartisan independent experts like the North Carolina Press Association, who bestowed awards upon them for their reporting. You know, it's just a time in which news consumers have to be very vigilant in how they consume news. And it's true for reading stuff on the left and the right. You can spend a day on Facebook and these sort of obscure websites pop up with supposed gossip about Trump, or, you have to be very careful about that stuff, is my only advice. I think you have to continue. I think there is still really good, solid reporting coming up from the Times and the Washington Post and even the News and Observer and other mainstream news outlets. I think we need to pay attention to them, patronize them. I think our stuff, there's some good stuff that actually comes out of the John Locke Foundation occasionally on Carolina Journal. I don't dismiss all their news reporting. So ultimately it's going to require each of us to be informed, intelligent consumers. And it sort of goes back to this issue how we've all got to be engaged. We've got to be out there on social media and not just shirk our duty to engage there and to talk to our friends and relatives, as painful as it might be, about what's really the truth, and contest the lies that Fox News and others tell. Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to do something that you maybe want to do, but I'll do it for you.
Okay.
And that is to say, I happen to be a donor to NC Policy Watch for the reasons he was just talking about, because I really trust them. And so I would encourage you. I know we're at a time when everybody's asking us for money, but I just want to make a pitch. ncpolicywatch.com. They can use your money, our money.
So sweet. Thank you very much. Yeah, there is a donate button.
One last question.
Sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Do you, does your website, or do you provide any kind of guidance for these sort of fake news websites?
It's a good idea. I would like to say we did. We don't. We have links to other websites that I find very reputable and worth paying attention to. But it's a good idea. It's probably a project one of our reporters should take on. I appreciate that. Maybe there are websites that do that, but it probably would be a good idea to have a list of the disreputable, the ones that have been exposed for their non-truth telling. I appreciate that suggestion. We'll talk about it at the team meeting this week. I did bring a few handouts that are about the Justice Center and about Policy Watch. Maybe I'll leave them on the back table when I go. Thank you so much.
When I first started coming to these meetings, I was so impressed with our speakers. And Rob, you were no exception. Thank you so much. That was so interesting. Just a quick note to the officers of the board. I ask that you not leave before we take one picture before you leave today, but not right now, because we want to say goodbye to everybody. Secondly, we encourage people when you come, especially our newer members who might not realize that we don't want to take money out of our budget for the coffee and the treats, so we keep a donation jar up there. And our ongoing fundraising support is for our food bank. And we have donations that are coming on a regular basis, but Ernestine looks for any and all cooperation with that, and she also will take money.
And our other project that we have is with the school supplies. And Tina, she takes donations every time we meet. You can get in touch with her. Either of our ladies, do you want to say something?
But I just really appreciate you ladies doing such a fantastic job. And I say, I think we had a donation for $2 all races, and then we had another $2 donation that was anonymous. And this time, second was 129 pounds of food.
Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn? Second? Say aye. Aye. Thank you so much.